Shock. During Christmas dinner at my son's house, I suddenly felt unwell. Shaking, I stumbled into the kitchen to get a glass of water, and that's when I noticed a strange jar filled with an unfamiliar liquid. Reading the label made me freeze. My hands trembled as I dialed 911. That small moment, between a family gathering and the harsh truth, changed everything. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. The evening news droned on about inflation rates when the shrill ring of the phone cut sharply through my quiet living room. I fumbled for my reading glasses, squinting at the caller ID. Wayne. My son never called this late on a weeknight. Dad? His voice cracked like a teenager's, though he was 42. I need your help. Urgently. The desperation in his words made me sit up straighter in my worn leather armchair. My coffee cup had gone cold hours ago, forgotten like everything else when worry took over. What happened, son? I asked. Silence. Only his ragged breathing filled the line. Then I could hear footsteps, fast, anxious, pacing across what I imagined was his kitchen floor, 40 minutes away in Royal Oak. I lost money, Dad. A lot of money. His voice dropped to a whisper. $50,000. My hand tightened around the receiver. $50,000. That was more than my entire pension would last in a year. How did you, cryptocurrency? The words were bitter, laced with self-reproach. I thought I was being smart, diversifying our savings. Joanna doesn't even know yet. The mantel clock ticked steadily, marking seconds that felt like hours. On TV, a weather reporter promised snow by Christmas. Life went on normally outside my window, while inside, my son's world was crumbling. Wayne, slow down. Tell me exactly what happened. More pacing. A chair scraped against tile. There was this investment opportunity. Digital assets, they called it. The returns looked incredible, 30% in 6 months. I used our emergency fund, our kids' college money. Even borrowed against the house. My chest tightened. You mortgaged the house? Not the whole thing. Just a home equity loan. $25,000. His voice broke completely now. Dad, they're demanding payment. The creditors, they say if I don't come up with the money by January 15th, they'll start seizure proceedings. I stood, my old knees protesting. The living room felt suddenly small, the walls pressing in. Through the bay window, Mrs. Chen's Christmas lights twinkled across the street, a cheerful reminder that normal families were preparing for the holidays, not financial disasters. Have you talked to a lawyer? Maybe there are options. I can't afford a lawyer. Wayne's voice rose, panic overtaking embarrassment. I can barely afford groceries. Do you understand what I'm telling you? They could take our house. Joanna and the kids would have nowhere to go. The image hit me like icy water. My daughter-in-law's gentle face, little Lula asking why they had to move, 8-year-old Tommy wondering if it was somehow his fault. Children should never bear their parents' mistakes. There has to be something we can do. I murmured, more to myself than to Wayne. I have some savings, maybe. Dad, you don't understand. His voice turned sharp, cutting. This isn't a few hundred. This is serious adult money. Life-changing money. The tone stung. When had my son started speaking to me like I was a child, as if my modest pension and careful savings were somehow inadequate? I'm trying to help, Wayne. I know. I know you are. He exhaled shakily. But I need real help. Substantial help. The kind that actually makes a difference. Static crackled through the connection. Outside, a car door slammed. Normal sounds of a normal evening in a normal neighborhood, where sons didn't call their fathers begging to be rescued from their own mistakes. But Wayne was still my son. Despite everything, the poor choices, the entitlement creeping into his voice, he was still the boy who had helped me rake leaves in this same yard, who cried when his goldfish died, who had called me his hero. Tell me what you need, I said quietly. The silence that followed lasted too long, long enough for me to realize that Wayne had been building towards something specific. Every carefully chosen word, every detail about the children's welfare, was leading somewhere. Dad. His voice softened, almost gentle. But underneath, I caught a flicker of something else, something that made my stomach clench with sudden unease. I'm here. There's one way you could help. One real solution that would fix everything. The way he said real solution made my blood run cold. I remained standing by my armchair, the phone pressed hard to my ear. Whatever Wayne was about to suggest, I already knew I wouldn't like it. What kind of solution? He cleared his throat, and I imagined him running a hand through his hair, the same gesture he had since childhood when plotting something questionable. You know how you're always complaining about maintaining that big house? The heating bills, the roof repairs, the yard work. My grip on the receiver tightened. Wayne, what exactly are you suggesting? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The house is worth at least $300,000 now. Probably more, with how property values have climbed. And you're there all alone, Dad. It's too much for someone your age. Someone my age? I shot back, teeth gritting. I'm 68, not 98. Think about it practically, he said, adopting that patient, explaining to a child tone that always made me want to hang up. You rattle around in 4 bedrooms by yourself. Maintenance costs are eating up your pension. Honestly, wouldn't you be happier somewhere smaller? Somewhere with less responsibility? A chill washed over me. You want me to sell my house? It would solve both our problems, Wayne said quickly, as if rushing would make it sound reasonable. You could get a nice little condo, maybe one of those senior communities with activities and meal plans. You'd have neighbors your own age. No more worrying about gutters or snow removal. And the leftover money. It would pay for your gambling debts. I snapped, my voice rising. It wasn't gambling, Dad, he said coldly. It was investing. I shot to my feet, rage building in my chest like steam in a boiling kettle. This is my home, Wayne. This is where your mother and I lived for 37 years. Where we raised you. Where she died. Mom's been gone for 3 years, he said flatly, the words cutting like steel. She's not coming back just because you keep her bedroom exactly the same. The cruelty of it struck me like a physical blow. I staggered, one hand on the wall to steady myself. How dare you? I'm being practical? I bellowed. You're being sentimental about a building? A building? My voice echoed off the walls that held every memory of my adult life. This was where your mother planted her roses. Where we celebrated Christmas morning every year until you moved out. Where she taught you to ride your bike in the driveway. And now, to you, it's just an expensive burden. Wayne's patience was thinning, his desperation bleeding through the practiced manipulation. Dad, be honest. When's the last time you used the upstairs? When's the last time you entertained anyone in that formal dining room? I thought of Margaret's sewing room, unchanged since the day she died. The morning light still touched her reading chair by the bedroom window. The kitchen where she had made my coffee every morning for nearly 40 years. You don't understand, I said quietly. I understand perfectly, Wayne shot back. You're being selfish. My family is about to lose everything, and you're worried about keeping a shrine to the past. A past that's gone. Mom is gone. Don't you tell me about your mother. She would want you to help us, to help her grandchildren. But you're so wrapped up in your precious memories that you can't see past your own feelings. My chest burned, the room seemed to spin. Think about Lula and Tommy. Think about Joanna. Do they matter less than your empty rooms and photo albums? That's not fair, I said, voice tight with fury. And you know it. What's not fair? He snapped. Is watching my children go homeless while my father sits in a house worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, too stubborn to make the smart choice. Smart choice, I repeated bitterly, as if selling the home where I had built my life could ever be a mere financial transaction. As if Margaret's memory could be packed up and moved to some sterile apartment complex designed for people waiting to die. The answer is no. Silence. Then what? He pressed. No, Wayne. I won't sell my house to pay for your mistakes. My mistakes? His voice turned vicious. You mean my attempt to provide better for my family? To give your grandchildren opportunities you never gave me? I gave you everything I could. Everything except the one thing I actually need right now. God, you're exactly like Mom always said, generous with your advice, stingy with your wallet. I stood frozen. Margaret had never said anything like that. She had been proud of how we worked and saved every penny to give Wayne opportunities we never had. Your mother never. I started, but he cut me off. Enjoy your empty house, Dad. Enjoy your precious memories. I hope they keep you warm when you're dying alone in that place. The line went dead. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry wasp. My hands shook, my whole body shook. Slowly, deliberately, I placed the receiver back in its cradle. The silence that followed was heavy. Different from the usual quiet of my evenings, carrying instead the weight of something irrevocable. The silence was brittle, hollow, the kind that lingers after an explosion. I sank back into my chair, but my body refused to relax. Every muscle remained taut, anticipating another strike. Wayne's words echoed through the empty house. Dying alone here, as if this home, the place Margaret and I had built together, were a prison rather than a sanctuary. I scanned the living room anew, trying to see what Wayne had seen. The furniture was worn but cared for. The carpet bore the subtle grooves of decades of daily life. Family photos lined the mantel, Wayne's graduation, his wedding, the kids' school portraits. Was this really just a shrine to the past? Without thinking, my feet led me to the kitchen. Muscle memory, maybe, or a need to be somewhere where Margaret's presence still lingered strongest. The oak table where we'd shared breakfast for decades. The window above the sink where she'd stood humming off-key show tunes as she washed dishes. The phone rang again, jolting my heart. Maybe Wayne calling to retract his words. But the caller ID read Frank Dawson. Roger, you sound awful. What's going on? Frank lived 3 houses down. He had been my friend long before Margaret fell ill. We'd worked side by side at Ford for 15 years, retiring within months of one another. If anyone would understand, it would be Frank. Wayne called, I said, and those 2 words carried everything. Let me guess, he wants money, Frank said, his voice tinged with disbelief. How did he? I'd known that boy since he was climbing my apple tree at 7. Impulsive was putting it mildly. I'll tell you everything, I said. I laid out the cryptocurrency disaster, the looming foreclosure, the house. When I recounted Wayne's last words about dying alone, Frank made a disgusted noise. That little manipulator. Using your grandchildren as leverage and then lashing out when it doesn't work. But what if he's right? The thought had been gnawing at me since the call ended. Maybe I was being selfish. Stop right there. Frank's voice sharpened. You raised him, sent him through college, helped with his down payment. You do not owe him your home because he gambled with money he shouldn't have. The children, sure, they have parents, and maybe those parents should have thought twice before risking their future on get-rich-quick schemes. But none of this is your fault, Roger. I sank into a kitchen chair. Through the window, Frank's porch light glowed. Funny, how a neighbor could offer more comfort than your own son. He'd want you to help them, I said. Margaret would want you to help if you could, Frank replied. But she'd also want you to keep your dignity and your home. She'd be furious at Wayne just for asking. The truth hit hard. Margaret had loved Wayne fiercely, but she would never have tolerated manipulation or emotional blackmail. She would have seen right through him. What should I do, Frank? Nothing. Not tonight. Don't make any decisions while you're angry or hurt. Wayne will probably call again tomorrow, either to apologize or to try another angle. Give yourself time to think clearly. After hanging up, I remained in the kitchen long after. The refrigerator hummed. The furnace kicked on. Normal house sounds that had been my companions for 40 years. I thought about Wayne's suggestion of a senior community with planned activities and meals. The thought made my skin crawl. Structured fun with strangers, cafeteria food, living in a box built for convenience, not comfort. Then I thought of Christmas, just 3 weeks away. For the past 3 years since Margaret's passing, Wayne's family had celebrated here. Lula and Tommy unwrapping gifts under the tree, Joanna helping me in the kitchen, Wayne pretending to like my coffee while secretly wishing it were stronger. Could this be our last Christmas in this home? Could his anger poison even that tradition? I opened the photo albums Margaret had meticulously maintained, flipping through memories. Our wedding day, young and serious. Wayne's first steps across this very kitchen floor. Backyard birthday parties. Margaret tending her garden, proud of tomatoes bigger than baseballs. Every corner of this house held fragments of our life together, not shrines to the past, as Wayne claimed, but the foundations of who I was. How could I explain that selling it would be like selling myself? Frank was right. I shouldn't make decisions tonight. But as I closed the albums and switched off the kitchen light, I felt the distance between Wayne and me widen, perhaps irreparably. The boy who once helped me rake leaves had become a man willing to disrupt his father's peace for money. Forgiveness might not come easily, for either of us. Sleep evaded me. I spent the night turning Wayne's cruel words, Frank's wisdom, and my own hurt over in my mind. By 10 a.m., I sat in my armchair, a third cup of coffee warming my hands, staring at the phone like it could offer solutions. Bank statements lay across the coffee table, $15,000 in savings. Monthly pension, $2,800. Not much by Wayne's standards, but honest earnings from 40 years of engineering work. Perhaps there was room for compromise. I lifted the receiver and dialed before doubt could stop me. The line rang twice before he answered. Dad? His voice sounded distracted. Maybe he was eating breakfast. Wayne, I said carefully. I've been thinking about our conversation last night. Perhaps we started off on the wrong foot. A pause. Background noise. Joanna asking something. Wayne shushing her. Look, I can't give you $50,000, I continued. But I checked my savings. I have $15,000 available. It's not much, but it's something. Silence stretched long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. $15,000, Wayne repeated, his voice carrying the same dismissive tone from yesterday. Dad, that's nowhere near what I need, Wayne said. I know it's not the full amount, but it would ease the immediate pressure. Maybe give you time to figure out a plan with the creditors. A plan? I echoed. Wayne laughed, but there was no humor in it. These aren't credit card companies, Dad. These are serious people. They want their money now. I gripped my coffee mug tighter. Well, what if I co-signed a loan? My credit is still good. Or maybe we could look into a partial refinance on my house. Stop. Wayne's voice cut sharp. Stop thinking small. I don't need a few thousand here and there. I need real money. Substantial money. 15,000 is substantial, to me, I said quietly. That's exactly the problem. Your idea of substantial and reality are two completely different things. My chest tightened. Wayne, I'm trying to help you. No, Dad. You're trying to feel better about yourself while offering pocket change. Do you even know what $50,000 looks like? Your 15,000 is pathetic. The word hit like a physical blow. Pathetic? I whispered. My life savings, painstakingly built over decades of careful living, dismissed as pathetic by my own son. Maybe if you hadn't gambled away your family's security. Don't lecture me about responsibility from your ivory tower. You've been living off Dad's pension and Mom's life insurance for 3 years, wandering around a house worth more than most people see in a lifetime. Your mother's life insurance barely covered her medical bills. The point is, you have options. Real options. You're just too selfish to use them. There it was again, selfish. As if wanting to keep the home where I had built my entire adult life was some moral failing. I offered you what I could afford, I said quietly. What you can afford without inconvenience to yourself. But what about what I can afford? Or what your grandchildren can afford when we end up living in our car? You're not going to be living in a car. How do you know? How do you know anything about what we're facing? You sit there in your comfortable house with your comfortable pension, judging other people's desperation. I stood, pacing to the kitchen window. Outside, the winter light made everything look stark, cold. Wayne, please, let's talk calmly. I am calm, he snapped. I'm just explaining simple math to someone who apparently doesn't understand numbers. 15,000 doesn't cover 50,000. A co-signed loan won't help when your credit's already ruined. Your little solutions are meaningless. They're not meaningless to me, I said. That's because you don't understand the scale of real problems. You live in a bubble where 15,000 feels like a lot because you've never been under serious financial pressure. The unfairness of it stole my breath. I had worked construction summers to pay for engineering school. Margaret and I had lived on soup and sandwiches when Wayne was born, saving every penny for his future. We drove the same car for 12 years, wore the same winter coats until they literally fell apart. I knew financial pressure. I said your mother and I reminded him. That was 50 years ago. Things are different now. Money is different now. If you don't have real money to offer, don't waste my time pretending to help. Real money. Everything else is play money, monopoly money. Not worth serious consideration. So unless you sell your house, you're wasting my time. Finally. He hung up. The line went dead. I stood, holding the phone, until the dial tone became unbearable. The receiver clattered to the kitchen floor. My coffee was cold. My hands shook again, and deep in my chest, something fractured that I wasn't sure could ever heal. The next 4 days passed in a haze of disbelief and reluctant clarity. I wandered through the house, touching Margaret's belongings, her reading glasses on the nightstand, her favorite coffee mug in the cabinet, the quilt she'd stitched draped over the sofa. Each morning I walked her garden. The rose bushes lay dormant, bare branches reaching toward the gray December sky like arthritic fingers. This was where she had spent her happiest hours, nurturing life from the soil. Now everything slept until spring. Except some things I was learning. Never wake up. By the third day, Frank knocked on the kitchen door. You look awful, he said, settling into the chair across from mine with his coffee cup. I feel worse, I admitted. Wayne again? I told him about the second call, Wayne dismissing my life savings as pathetic, pocket change, not enough to matter. Frank listened quietly, shaking his head from time to time. My brother-in-law was like that, Frank said when I finished. Always saw family as a funding source for his schemes. It started small, hundreds here, a couple hundred there. Then it escalated to thousands. Eventually, he wanted us to mortgage our house for his restaurant idea. What did you do? I asked. Said no. He didn't speak to us for 2 years. Frank took a thoughtful sip of coffee. Best 2 years of our marriage, if I'm honest. I stared out the kitchen window at the frost-covered birdbath Margaret had loved. But Wayne's my son. Wayne is a 42-year-old man making 42-year-old choices. You didn't force him to gamble away his family's money. It wasn't gambling. It was investing, I muttered. Frank raised an eyebrow. Potato. Potato. Point is, his bad choices don't create obligations for you. That afternoon, I sat in my study surrounded by legal papers. Our will, insurance policies, the house deed. Margaret and I had been meticulous, planning for every emergency, every repair, even potential long-term care. We hadn't planned for our son treating us like an ATM. I opened the will and read the section about Wayne's inheritance. Everything would eventually go to him, the house, the remaining savings, Margaret's jewelry, but, eventually, wasn't soon enough. Wayne wanted his inheritance now, while I was still alive. The realization struck like ice water. Wayne wasn't seeing me as his father anymore. He saw me as a barrier standing between him and money. That evening, Frank called. I keep thinking about something you said, I told him. About family being a source of funding. Is that all I am to Wayne now? What do you think? I thought about the cruelty in his voice when he called my savings pathetic, the way he dismissed 40 years of careful planning, the way he hung up the moment I refused to sell the house. I think my son is gone, I said softly. And I don't know who this person is who's taken his place. Sometimes desperation just reveals what was always there, Frank said. Sometimes people show you who they really are when they're cornered. You think Wayne was always this selfish? I think Wayne was always spoiled. You and Margaret gave him everything he wanted. College paid for, help with a down payment, Christmas gifts for the kids every year. He's never had to face real consequences for his choices. The truth stung. We had made things too easy for Wayne. What would Margaret say about all this? I asked. Frank was quiet for a moment. She would be heartbroken, yes, but she'd also be furious at Wayne for treating you this way. She'd want you to protect yourself. After we hung up, I wandered through the house once more. Every room held pieces of family history. Wayne accused me of selfishness for preserving the hallway where he took his first steps, the dining room where birthday parties were held, the living room where Christmas mornings were celebrated. But those memories were of a different time. A boy who had helped me rake leaves cried when his hamster died, clung tight to me when learning to ride his bike. That boy had become a man who called his father's life savings pathetic. Standing in Margaret's sewing room, I made a decision. I wouldn't sell the house to fund Wayne's poor choices, but I also wouldn't let him destroy the remnants of our relationship with demands and manipulation. The next time he called, I would be ready, with an answer that protected both my home and my dignity. I just hoped I had the strength to follow through. December 21st arrived with a bone-chilling cold that made every joint ache. I stirred soup for dinner when the phone rang, slicing through the kitchen's warmth like a winter wind through an open door. Wayne's name flashed on the caller ID, and my hand hesitated over the receiver, Frank's warnings echoing in my mind. 5 days had passed since Wayne's brutal dismissal of my help, 5 days of silence that had brought a strange kind of peace. On the fourth ring, I answered. Dad? Wayne's voice sounded different this time, softer, hesitant, uncertain. I'm glad you picked up. Look, I owe you an apology. A big one. He paused, and I could hear the background sounds. Joanna moving around what sounded like their kitchen, distant voices of the children. I was completely out of line the other day. Stress makes people say cruel things, but that's no excuse. Still, I stayed silent. Something about Wayne's words felt rehearsed, too carefully chosen. Dad, are you there? I'm here. I've been thinking about what you said, about taking things slower, looking for other solutions. Maybe you're right. Maybe I've been too demanding. Demanding. That was one way to put it. The thing is, Wayne continued, his voice softening with what sounded like genuine emotion. Christmas is in 4 days. Joanna's been cooking all week, and the kids keep asking about Grandpa Roger. They want to show you their school projects, tell you their Christmas lists. Through the phone, a child's voice, Tommy, maybe, chattered about presents. Normal family sounds tugged at the corners of my heart I'd been guarding so carefully. I know I heard you, Wayne said quietly. I know I said cruel and unfair things. But Dad, it's Christmas. Come to dinner. Let's be a family again. The invitation hung between us. Part of me, the grandfather part, the part that remembered Wayne as a sweet child, wanted to say yes immediately. But Frank's voice whispered warnings, manipulation, kindness shown only when someone wanted something. I don't know, Wayne, please. My own voice cracked. The kids have been asking why Grandpa can't come. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them adults sometimes say stupid things they don't mean, I said. The guilt hit sharp and immediate. Lula and Tommy didn't deserve to suffer because their father and I couldn't get along. They were innocent, just children who wanted their grandfather at Christmas dinner. Have you told Joanna about the financial situation? I asked. A pause. Some of it, she knows things are tight. Not the whole truth. Maybe Wayne had decided that himself. Dad, I promise, no talk about money. No pressure about anything. Just family dinner, just Christmas. The kids have presents for you. Little handmade things from school. Lula made you a clay mug in art class. A handmade mug. The image of my granddaughter carefully shaping clay, thinking of me, nearly broke my resolve. Joanna's making her famous prime rib. Wayne continued. Remember how much you loved it last year? She's been planning the menu for weeks. I could picture it. The warm kitchen, children laughing, the comfortable chaos of family gatherings. It had been my favorite tradition since Margaret died, the one day each year the house felt truly alive. I won't take no for an answer, Wayne said, now with a playful tone I recognized from my old father-son negotiations over bedtimes and allowances. The kids would never forgive me if Grandpa missed Christmas. Behind him, I heard Joanna calling about the table and a child asking if Grandpa was coming. Normal family sounds from normal family people. Maybe I had been too suspicious. Maybe stress had made Wayne say things he didn't mean. Maybe Christmas dinner could help us find our way back to each other. What time? I heard myself ask. 4 o'clock. And Dad, thank you. This means everything to all of us. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen holding the phone, watching steam rise from my forgotten soup. Something about Wayne's sudden change of heart still felt off, but the thought of seeing Lula and Tommy outweighed my caution. 4 days until Christmas dinner. 4 days to decide whether I was making a mistake, or taking a chance on family. December 22nd dawned crisp and bright. Winter sunlight streamed through the bedroom windows like a promise. For the first time in days, I woke without that familiar knot in my stomach. Wayne's apology felt sincere, and the idea of seeing Lula and Tommy filled me with anticipation I hadn't felt since Margaret died. While brewing coffee, I found myself humming one of her favorite Christmas carols. The melody felt rusty, but right somehow. I pulled out the kitchen calendar, circled December 24th in red, and stepped back to admire it, like a child counting down to Christmas morning. The toy store downtown buzzed with last-minute shoppers. I wandered the aisles carefully, checking age recommendations and educational value the way Margaret had taught me. For Lula, I picked a chemistry set for young scientists. She'd always been curious about how things worked. Tommy got a model airplane kit, something we could build together if he visited again. At the checkout counter, the saleswoman smiled. Lucky grandchildren. I hope so, I said, meaning it more than she could know. That evening, Frank appeared at my kitchen door unannounced. His face carried the kind of concern usually reserved for doctors' visits. You're making a mistake, Frank said, settling into his usual chair. Nice to see you too, Frank, I muttered. I'm serious, Roger. Something doesn't feel right about Wayne's sudden change of heart. I poured him coffee, stirring my own slowly. People can change, I said. Stress makes us say things we don't mean, but stress also shows who we really are. Frank leaned forward, elbows on the kitchen table. Think about the timing. He calls you pathetic, hangs up on you, ignores you for 5 days, and suddenly remembers he loves you. Maybe he talked to Joanna. Maybe she helped him realize how cruel he'd been. Or maybe he just realized that insulting you wasn't getting him what he wanted. The word stung because part of me wondered the same thing. But the alternative, believing my son was irredeemably selfish, was a pain I couldn't bear. The children have been asking about me, I said. Wayne told me, Frank said, softening slightly. I know you miss them. But manipulative people use whatever leverage works, even innocent kids. After Frank left, I spent the evening in my study with photo albums, flipping through Wayne's childhood, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, moments when he seemed genuinely happy. That sweet boy had to still exist somewhere inside the man who'd called my life savings pathetic. December 23rd, I tackled Margaret's apple pie recipe. Her handwriting covered the yellowed index card in precise blue ink, measurements, timing notes, temperature reminders accumulated over decades. My hands shook slightly as I measured the flour, remembering how she guided my fingers the first time I helped. The kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg, and the house felt alive again. For 3 hours I existed in a bubble where Margaret might walk through the door any moment, criticizing my messy technique while secretly pleased I was trying. When the pie emerged golden and perfect, I nearly wept. That evening, I wrapped presents at the kitchen table with the same careful precision Margaret had always used. Sharp corners, neat ribbons, tags written in my best handwriting. Lula and Tommy deserved that attention. They deserved to feel special. My phone rang as I tied the final bow. "How are the preparations going, Dad?" Wayne's voice sounded genuinely interested. "Good. I made your mother's apple pie. The kids will love that. They've been asking about Grandpa's cooking all week." His warmth melted the last of my resistance. This was my son, the boy who'd helped me in the garden, who'd cried at his mother's funeral, who once told me I was his hero. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," I said. "We all are. 4 o'clock sharp. And Dad, thank you. This means everything to us." After hanging up, I laid out my clothes for Christmas Eve: the red sweater Margaret had knitted for me last Christmas, pressed slacks, the tie Wayne had given me for Father's Day 2 years ago. Everything had to be perfect. Standing in the bedroom, I caught my reflection in Margaret's vanity mirror, an old man preparing to spend Christmas with his family. Hope and nervousness warred in my expression. Frank's warnings echoed in my mind, but I pushed them aside. Some risks were worth taking, especially when innocent children were involved. Tomorrow, I would find out whether my son had truly changed, or whether Frank's suspicions were justified. Christmas Eve arrived gray and cold, but my spirits remained bright as I loaded the wrapped gifts into my car. The 40-minute drive to Wayne's townhouse passed quickly, filled with mental rehearsals of conversations with my grandchildren and careful navigation through unfamiliar streets. Wayne's neighborhood looked picture-perfect: matching mailboxes, manicured lawns, Christmas lights twinkling from every roofline. His townhouse sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, adorned with wreaths and garlands Joanna had likely spent days arranging. I gathered the gifts from the back seat and took a deep breath of winter air before approaching the front door. Through the frosted glass, I saw movement and heard children's voices raised in excitement. Wayne opened the door before I could knock, his face breaking into what looked like genuine joy. "Dad, perfect timing." He pulled me into a firm hug that felt real, not performative. "The kids have been watching for your car for an hour." Before I could respond, Lula appeared at his side, dark hair flying as she threw herself at my legs. "Grandpa! We missed you so much!" Tommy appeared seconds later, slightly more reserved but grinning widely. "Did you bring the magic tricks? Mom said you might remember some." The warmth flooding my chest was pure and uncomplicated. These children loved me without agenda, without calculations about money or property. Their affection was the most honest thing I'd felt in months. "Let's see what Santa brought for you, too," I said, hefting the gift bags. The living room blazed with Christmas cheer, a 7-foot tree heavy with ornaments, stockings hung on the mantel, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Joanna emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron dusted with flour, her smile warm but tentative. "Roger, so wonderful to see you." Her hug felt careful, her eyes avoiding mine. "Dinner's almost ready, prime rib just like you love. Smells incredible." I handed her Margaret's apple pie. Her eyes brightened with what seemed genuine pleasure. "The children will be thrilled. They've been asking about Grandma Margaret's recipes." Gift opening became joyful chaos. Lula squealed over the chemistry set, diving into the test tubes and color tablets. Tommy studied the airplane kit with serious concentration, tracing the wing designs with one finger. "Can we build it together, Grandpa?" "Absolutely. Next visit we'll make it fly." Wayne watched these interactions with apparent satisfaction, playing the proud father perfectly. He helped Tommy organize the airplane pieces, praised Lula's scientific curiosity, and took pictures of every moment on his phone. "Family photo time," he announced, arranging everyone around the tree. This might be our best Christmas yet. Standing with my arm around Wayne's shoulders, Lula and Tommy pressed close to my sides, I felt something I hadn't in years, since Margaret died, perhaps. A sense of complete belonging. Whatever doubts Frank had planted now seemed distant and foolish. This was my family, flawed but real, and we were together. Dinner preparation led us to the dining room, where Joanna had created a table worthy of a magazine spread. White linens, gold-rimmed china, candles reflecting off crystal glasses filled with deep red wine. The prime rib sat at the head of the table like a crown jewel, surrounded by roasted vegetables and Yorkshire pudding. "This is beautiful, Joanna," I said, settling into my seat. She bustled around, making last-minute adjustments with nervous energy. "Just want everything perfect for Christmas," she admitted. Wayne took his place at the head of the table, raising his wine glass with ceremonious gravity. "Before we eat, I want to make a toast." His voice carried weight, the significance of family, forgiveness, second chances, and the people who matter most. Everyone raised their glasses. Even the children had small portions of wine mixed with juice. The crystal caught the candlelight, scattering tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. "To family," we echoed in unison. The wine was excellent, rich, smooth, with hints of cherry. I savored both the taste and the moment, grateful for Wayne's apparent growth, Joanna's warmth, and my grandchildren's unconditional love. Around the table, conversation flowed naturally. Tommy described his school's Christmas pageant, Lula explained her science fair project, and Wayne shared amusing stories from the office. Normal family interaction. The kind Margaret and I had dreamed of when Wayne was small. But as I reached for my water glass, something felt slightly off. A faint dizziness, like standing too quickly after sitting for too long. I blinked, blaming the wine and the excitement of the evening. The conversation continued. Wayne carved the prime rib with practiced skill while Joanna served vegetables. The children chattered about Christmas morning plans. Everything felt perfectly ordinary, perfectly right. "Grandpa, do you want to see my clay mug after dinner?" Lula asked, bouncing in her chair. "Absolutely," I said. "I hear it's a masterpiece." The wine was stronger than I'd expected, leaving me pleasantly warm, or perhaps it was just the joy of being included, of sitting at a family table where I was wanted, not tolerated. I reached for my water glass again, noticing my hand trembled slightly. Excitement, surely. My heart had been racing since I arrived, caught between the children's energy and Wayne's apparent transformation. "Dad, you look a little flushed," Wayne said, voice gentle, genuinely concerned. "Everything okay?" "Just warm. Joanna's cooking always makes me feel at home." But then something twisted sharply in my stomach, a cramp that made me shift in my chair. It passed quickly, so I dismissed it as overindulgence, the rich food, the wine, the intensity of reconciliation. Tommy was telling a story about his teacher's pet rabbit when the room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table, blinking. The candle flames stretched into golden streaks, the edges of the room blurring. "Are you sure you're all right, Roger?" Joanna's voice carried anxiety that felt too large for my minor discomfort. "Just need some water," I said, trying to smile, though my mouth felt oddly dry despite the wine. Wayne half rose from his chair. "The kitchen's right through there if you want fresh water." "Take your time." The cramping intensified, joined now by waves of nausea making it hard to swallow. I pressed my hand to my forehead, feeling clammy despite the room's warmth. Maybe I should. I tried to stand, but dizziness swept over me and I sat back abruptly. The dining room spun, faces around the table softened and blurred. "Grandpa?" Lula's voice sounded distant, though she sat right across from me. "You don't look good. Should we call someone?" Joanna asked quietly, her hands twisting her napkin into tight spirals. Wayne's voice stayed calm. "Dad, why don't you step into the kitchen? Maybe splash some cold water on your face." The excitement might be overwhelming. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. The nausea and cramps tightened steadily, my stomach clenching with increasing urgency. Standing required every ounce of concentration. My legs felt like dead weights, disconnected from my body, responding sluggishly to commands my mind struggled to issue. Sorry, I managed, my voice weak. Don't want to ruin Christmas dinner. You're not ruining anything, Wayne said, his tone perfectly measured, equal parts concern and reassurance. These things happen. Take all the time you need. The walk to the kitchen stretched endlessly. I leaned against the wall for support, visions swimming as familiar Christmas sounds followed me, children laughing, silverware clinking against plates, Wayne explaining to Lula and Tommy that older people sometimes just needed to rest. Each step demanded focus. My breathing was shallow, labored, as if the very air had thickened around me. The hallway walls seemed to close in. The kitchen doorway wavered like a mirage. Behind me, Joanna's voice whispered hesitantly. Should we? He'll be fine, Wayne interrupted smoothly. Just needs a moment to collect himself. But I wasn't fine. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. My heart raced while my limbs grew heavier with every heartbeat. My mouth tasted metallic, strange. The warmth of family dinner had turned cold and threatening. I reached the kitchen doorway, gripping the frame to steady myself. The room looked altered somehow, shadows deeper, surfaces more distant. The familiar had turned sinister. Cool tile pressed beneath my feet. Harsh overhead lights made me squint after the gentle candlelight of the dining room. I leaned against the counter, clutching the granite edge as nausea swept through me in waves. This wasn't excitement. Not wine, not rich food. My body was betraying me in terrifying, unfamiliar ways. I turned toward the sink for cold water when movement near the table caught my eye. A small glass vial lay on its side beside Wayne's car keys. Clear liquid pooled at the bottom. My vision blurred as I tried to focus, but I knew instantly what it was. Empty medicine bottle. The room tilted. I reached blindly for support, knocking a mixing bowl off the counter. It shattered against the tile, fragments scattering like shattered thoughts. Dad? Wayne's voice came from the dining room. Everything okay in there? I stared at the vial, my mind sluggishly connecting the dots. Medicine, empty. Wayne's keys, the wine toast, the careful timing. Fine, I croaked, my voice barely recognizable. Just clumsy. But I wasn't fine. My son had poisoned me. The thought should have felt impossible, but it settled with a cold, horrible clarity. Wayne's sudden apology, the insistence on Christmas dinner, the toast to family, Joanna's nervous energy, the way Wayne had watched me drink, all pieces of a deliberate plan. I fumbled for my phone. My hands shook violently, the screen blurred as I tried to dial 911. My fingers slipped, pressing wrong numbers, sliding over the smooth glass. Need some help? Wayne's voice came from directly behind me. I spun, nearly toppling as vertigo struck. He stood in the doorway, calm, calculating, eyes curious as he watched me struggle. The mask of the concerned son was gone. You did this, I slurred. You poisoned me. Wayne stepped fully into the kitchen, closing the door quietly behind him. Smart man, he said. Even dying, you figure things out? Why? I pressed against the counter, phone useless in my trembling hand. Because you're selfish, he said. Because you'd rather die in that ridiculous house than help your family. Because you chose memories over your son's future. The coldness in his voice cut deeper than the poison coursing through me. This wasn't desperation. It was deliberate. Calculated. Murder. The children will inherit everything once you're gone, he continued, and I'm the only surviving family member. They'll never want for anything again. I tried to press 911, but Wayne was faster. He snatched the phone from my hands, sliding it across the counter and out of reach. That won't be necessary, he said calmly. Heart attack, Wayne said casually. Brought on by the excitement of Christmas dinner. Very sad. Very believable for a man your age. Joanna knows. The words felt thick in my mouth. Joanna would say whatever he told her. She was good at following instructions when the children's welfare was at stake. My legs gave way. I slid down the cabinet doors until I was sitting on the cold tile floor, back pressed against the wood, the only anchor to reality. The kitchen spun around me, Wayne standing in the center like the eye of a hurricane. "This didn't have to happen," he said conversationally. "You could have sold the house willingly. Could have helped your family when we needed it. Instead, you were stubborn. I worked 40 years for that house," I whispered. "It's mine, along with my savings, my pension, everything." Wayne smiled faintly. "Funny how death simplifies property law." The vial on the table came into focus as my vision narrowed. Clear. Odorless. Tasteless. Something designed to mimic a heart attack in an elderly man. "What did you give me?" I managed. Wayne glanced at his watch. "Does it matter? You'll be unconscious in 10 minutes. Dead in 30. The coroner will find an old man who pushed himself too hard during an emotional evening. 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes to save myself, or stop Wayne from destroying more lives. My phone lay across the kitchen, 8 feet away, or 8 miles, it might as well have been. "Lula and Tommy," I gasped. "They love me. They'll be okay. Children are resilient. Besides, they'll be too busy enjoying their inheritance to mourn for long." The casual cruelty of it cut deeper than the poison itself. My son had become a stranger. No, worse. A stranger might hesitate or feel guilt. Wayne felt nothing but satisfaction. But he made one mistake: he was talking instead of leaving. Pride kept him in the kitchen, giving me precious minutes while he should have been back in the dining room to establish his alibi. 6 minutes left. Sirens wailed in the distance, slicing through the winter night. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, watching through the kitchen window as red and blue lights painted the street. "They're here," I whispered to the dispatcher. "Police outside." "Stay on the line, sir. Officers will want to speak with you directly." Heavy footsteps pounded up Wayne's front walkway. Sharp knocks echoed through the house, followed by authoritative voices calling his name. Chairs scraped against hardwood. Children's confused questions. Joanna's sharp intake of breath. "Police! Open the door!" Wayne's voice carried from the hall, bewildered. "Officers, what is this about? It's Christmas Eve. My family's eating dinner." The front door opened. Boots on hardwood, professional voices demanding ID, asking about household members, insisting to speak with me immediately. "My father's in the kitchen," Wayne said, suspicion creeping into his tone. "Is he all right?" The kitchen door swung open. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by paramedics carrying equipment. A female officer with kind eyes approached slowly. "Mr. Harper, I'm Officer Martinez. We understand you've been poisoned." I held up the small glass vial with trembling fingers. Rat poison. Arsenic-based. I had discovered it hidden among the spice jars after drinking the wine that made me sick. Officer Martinez took the bottle carefully, examining it through an evidence bag. Her partner began photographing the kitchen, documenting the spice rack, the wine glasses still on the counter. "Is the person who poisoned you still in the house?" "My son, Wayne. He's in the dining room with his family." The words felt surreal. My son. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The man who just tried to murder me for inheritance money. From the dining room came Wayne's voice, rising as comprehension dawned. "Dad, what are you telling them? What's happening?" Officer Martinez spoke into her radio. "Need backup in the dining room. Suspect present with potential hostages." "The children are innocent," I said quickly. "Joanna knew about the plan but was threatened. The kids know nothing." Paramedics checked my vital signs, asking about nausea, dizziness, timing, blood pressure cuff, pulse oximeter, questions I barely managed to answer. Their efficiency was reassuring. I was going to survive this. The kitchen door burst open. Wayne stood in the doorway, cycling through confusion, realization, and finally cold fury. You called the police on me, on Christmas Eve, in front of my children. Two officers moved quickly to flank him, hands resting on their service weapons. Wayne's gaze locked on the evidence bag containing the poison bottle, and his expression shifted entirely. The mask of the concerned son vanished, replaced by something cold, calculating, dangerous. Wayne Harper, you're under arrest for attempted murder, Officer Martinez announced steadily, professional. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane, Wayne said, voice cracking with desperation. I didn't poison anyone. He's confused, sick, making accusations, I muttered, though his eyes told a different story. Calculating. Watching. Searching for an escape or explanation that might work. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists with metallic finality. Color drained from his face as the truth sank in. His plan had failed completely. Not only was I alive, but I had found the evidence to send him to prison. From the dining room came the sound of children crying, Joanna's voice trying to comfort them through her own sobs. Lula calling for her daddy. Tommy asking why the police were being mean. They shouldn't see this, I said to Officer Martinez. Social services is on the way. We'll make sure they're safe. Wayne was led through the kitchen toward the front door, head down, shoulders slumped in defeat. Passing my chair, he looked up once more. I hope you're satisfied, he said quietly. You've destroyed your family. No, Wayne, I replied steadily. You did that when you decided money was worth more than love. Paramedics helped me to my feet and guided me toward the ambulance waiting outside. Through the front window, neighbors had gathered despite the cold, drawn by flashing lights and police activity. Christmas Eve in suburban Detroit had become a crime scene. As I was loaded into the ambulance, I glimpsed Joanna holding both children, tears streaming down all three faces, as a social worker approached with gentle words and official papers. The family Wayne had claimed to protect was now fractured beyond repair. The ambulance doors closed, cutting off the sight of flashing lights and broken dreams. By February, Michigan mornings had a crisp clarity that made everything feel possible again. I stood in my kitchen making coffee the way Margaret had taught me 40 years ago, watching Frank navigate my icy driveway with careful determination. The past 2 months had transformed my life in ways I never could have imagined. Wayne's trial lasted only 3 days. Evidence was overwhelming, his plan obvious, his motive unmistakable. 15 years for attempted murder, with no possibility of parole for the first decade. Morning, survivor, Frank said, stamping snow from his boots at my back door. How are you feeling? Grateful, I said. The word came easier now than it had in January, when grief and betrayal made even breathing feel like a struggle. Coffee brewed fresh. New routines had settled into place. Frank's daily visits, shared meals, quiet conversations about everything except Wayne's current location in state prison. Some wounds required time to heal. At precisely 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Joanna stood on my porch with Lula and Tommy, their weekend bags packed for another stay with their grandfather. The divorce proceedings had been swift. No one wanted to remain married to an attempted murderer, but Joanna's financial situation remained precarious. Mr. Harper, she said, her voice still carrying shame 3 months later. They're my grandchildren, I interrupted gently. This is their home, too. The children rushed past their mother, now familiar with the routine. Homework at the kitchen table, afternoon projects in the garage, evening stories by the fireplace. Normal grandparent activities that felt revolutionary after everything we'd endured. Did you finish the airplane, Grandpa? Tommy asked, heading straight for the workbench where our models sat in various stages of completion. Waiting for you to attach the wings. Can't have a proper first flight without the chief engineer present. While the children settled in, Joanna and I reviewed the legal paperwork that had become part of our new reality. The educational trust for Lula and Tommy was fully funded, college tuition, graduate school if they chose, money for books, and living expenses. Wayne's attempt to steal their future had instead secured it completely. The charity distributions are going well, I said, showing her the bank statements detailing monthly payments to veterans organizations, the local hospital, and community programs supporting families in crisis. Margaret would have approved. What about Wayne? Joanna asked quietly. Do you ever think about visiting him? I watched Tommy carefully align airplane wings, his small face serious with concentration. I think about the boy he used to be, I said. I mourn that child. But the man who tried to poison me for money, that person is a stranger. Frank nodded from his chair by the window. Forgiveness doesn't require stupidity. The children ask about their father sometimes. Joanna continued. I don't know what to tell them. Tell them he made bad choices and must face the consequences, I said. Tell them those choices don't define them or limit their futures. Tell them their grandfather loves them. Later that afternoon, Frank and I worked in Margaret's garden while the children played in the backyard snow. Spring was still weeks away, but we were preparing beds for new plantings, clearing dead growth for whatever would grow next. You know what? I said, resting against my shovel. Wayne was right about one thing. I was living in the past, keeping this house like a shrine to Margaret. Frank looked up from the rose bush he was pruning. And now? Now it's a home again, I continued. Full of children's laughter, family dinners, people who choose to be here because they love each other, not because they want something. Through the kitchen window, I saw Lula and Tommy at the table, working on homework with the same focused intensity one remembered from Wayne's childhood. But unlike their father, they would grow up knowing the difference between love and manipulation, between true family loyalty and selfish financial demands. Will you change your will again? Frank asked. I nodded. I'll leave the house to them eventually, when they're old enough to understand what it really represents, not just money or property, but the choice to build something lasting, something worth protecting. That evening, after Joanna had taken the children home and Frank returned to his own house, I settled into Margaret's chair by the living room window. The neighborhood was quiet, cocooned in its Sunday evening routines. Normal families and normal houses, probably handling ordinary problems that didn't involve poison or attempted murder. My phone rang. Frank, checking in before bedtime, as he had grown accustomed to doing. Any regrets about not selling the house when Wayne asked? He asked. I let my gaze wander over the room, where Margaret and I had celebrated 40 Christmases, where Wayne had unwrapped presents as a boy, and where now Lula and Tommy could feel safe and cherished. None whatsoever, I said. This house has good bones. It survived someone trying to destroy it from the inside. It'll outlast whatever comes next. After we hung up, I poured one final cup of coffee and stepped onto the back porch. The winter air was crisp in my lungs, stars peeking through the skeletal branches of trees. Somewhere, 2 hours away in a prison cell, Wayne was discovering that some consequences endure far longer than others. But here, in the home he had tried to claim, life went on. Children would grow up safe. Money would serve goodness rather than corruption. Love would be given freely, not wielded as a weapon. I realized that justice wasn't only about punishment, it was about protection. About making sure the good things survived, while the poisonous things were contained where they could no longer spread. Margaret would have understood that completely. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.